Is growing after law enforcement is seen keeping a watchful eye over the Orthodox Jewish community in New York City. I want you to take a look at this video. You can see here New York City Sheriff searching a yeshiva for possible students or people praying. In the windows there, the brazen move comes after New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo imposed new state-mandated lockdown orders on coronavirus hotspots in Brooklyn. Now, on behalf of leaders within New York's Orthodox Jewish community, the Center for American Liberty has filed a lawsuit against the state and local leadership over the zone COVID-19 shutdown, calling it discriminatory. And again, there's deputies looking for folks praying inside or students disobeying the rules. Joining us now to discuss is the lawyer who sent the governor a strongly worded letter announcing the lawsuit. That is Ron Coleman, partner at Dhillon Law Group, Incorporated. Ron, thanks so much for coming on. Sensitive topic here. Folks may be watching this and wondering, what world do we live in here? In the letter that you wrote, you say the lockdowns impact the Jewish Orthodox community's fundamental rights to freedom of religion, assembly, speech, and travel. Can you explain that to me?
Yes, and if you just don't mind, I'll explain that we didn't get a response to the letter, so we filed a lawsuit a couple of nights ago, and we're now officially in litigation with the state. It's very clear that the restrictions in this instance, and the governor has as much as admitted this in a recorded phone call with Jewish leaders, that the restrictions were based entirely on identifying strictly Orthodox or so-called ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods and synagogues, and essentially gerrymandering or carving out districts around them that would be subject to special restrictions. And our lawsuit focuses on Rockland County in New York. But the videos you showed in the beginning are the New York City version of what it means to enforce rules against public prayer and worship that are constitutionally guaranteed. It's outrageous.
Ron, is this a risky case for you to take? I know you've taken several different ones, I imagine, over your career. What did you think about this one? Did you want to go all in on this one? Was this iffy, or what are your thoughts on this from a legal standpoint?
Well, I'll tell you this. We're aware that the vast majority of these challenges to government restrictions on worship have been rejected by the courts. We think that virtually all of them have been wrongly decided. Many of them are going to ultimately be shown to have been wrongly decided. But the one that we have in hand here is really unusual because, again, you have this aspect of redlining. Before you have this sort of broad-based, nobody in the state can do X. And one of the things that judges frequently were saying, in fact, in the case that I filed in New Jersey, we argue that the fact that people are just as much restricted from going to the movies as they are restricted from going to church or synagogue is not an answer, because there's no constitutional right to go to the movies as such. Judges have been reluctant to agree, especially after some of the earlier Supreme Court opinions that were based entirely on injunctive relief issues. This case, however, doesn't involve a comparison between going to the movies and going to synagogue or church. It explicitly applies only to houses of worship and only to Jewish houses of worship, although it is true that if there are churches within the red zones, as they're called, they are also restricted. There are cases where these red zones have been carved to actually go right between a church and a synagogue. This is a case that had to be filed, and whether or not we lose at this level or not, we file them because the case has to be made, and above all, our clients feel very strongly that the entire concept of designating public worship and communal worship as a non-essential activity is, besides being theologically unsound, obviously, very constitutionally problematic.
Let me jump in really quick, Ron, because I have a limited amount of time, but I think a lot of folks, even not of the Jewish faith, agree with the standpoint, and this probably is bothersome just to have folks watching and seeing if they're praying and these, wanting to enforce these rules on them. I want to play you something here. These are some comments from New York's governor last week about the new coronavirus lockdown orders, now in effect until Election Day. Watch.
You need to take action to slow the rate, and that's what it is. To the extent there are communities that are upset, that's because they hadn't been following the original rules. And that's why the infection spread, because they weren't following the rules. But that's why we are where we are. Make no mistake.
But yet, these strong measures, these strong comments never came with the tens of thousands of protesters that descended upon New York City. But it is strictly targeting, and some would say, the Jewish faith. Do you think that? Do your clients think that? Where do you stand with those comments from Cuomo?
I don't think anyone had any question about it. There's a lot worse stuff than that in that recording. Much of it has been folded into our complaint that was filed in federal court. Can you imagine if targeting communities were constitutionally permissible, what happened? Why was stop and frisk found to be unconstitutional? If the governor had said, listen, we all know that blacks are highly associated statistically with violent or street crime, so therefore we find that blacks as a community are not following the rules, and therefore we're going to target blacks and stop and frisk them. That would be unthinkable, and appropriately so. You cannot target a community. That's unconstitutional.
Ron, talk to me about your clients. You don't have to mention any by name, obviously, but I'm just curious on the emotional aspect, the toll that's taken. When they come to you and they want representation, they want their voice to be heard, what is the emotional impact of that? What have you seen from this? Is this, hey, I'm not treated fairly, can you please help me out? Or is there real emotion behind these folks? Explain that to us.
Well, there really is, and I'll answer in two ways. One is that the video you showed at the beginning showing state officials monitoring synagogues and study halls to see if there is illegal studying, Talmudic study, which is a form of religious worship, or praying going on. This is the kind of stuff that children in our yeshivas and our schools grow up learning about happened in Roman times or in medieval Europe. And during the Holocaust. It's extraordinary. I mean, I'm not saying this is the Holocaust. I'm saying that these images are phenomenally offensive. But also in terms of our clients, one particular, Rabbi Rottenberg, he's the one at whose home the anti-Semitic attack took place in Hanukkah in December of last year. And the governor was at that house the next morning, promising him that hate had no place in New York and that anti-Semitism would always be, that the state and the governor would always stand at our side with respect to anti-Semitism. What's the next thing he does? Not the next thing, but what has he done now? He's repeated, as Josh Blackman, the very able law professor, noted in a recent commentary, he's repeated an age-old canard that Jews are responsible for spreading disease. And it's not even statistically true that ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods are any higher in terms of infection than many other neighborhoods that have been including entire counties that have been utterly unaffected by these measures. This is a political payback, and the effect is, in fact, anti-Semitic.
And I want folks to know at home, too, these are case counts that they're referencing. This is not even hospitalizations. These are case counts, folks going, they got tested. That was it. That's all you're looking at there. And I also want to point out that in the NFL, by the way, teams are completely hit with COVID over and over, the Atlanta Falcons. So you continue to allow folks to play a game for folks to watch, and they keep coming down with COVID. Nothing happens there. That continues to go on. The hypocrisy is real. You continue to watch it every single day, and it's tough. Keep me informed of what's happening with that. Ron Coleman joining us live. Ron, thank you.